All right, so we ended up the end of the last lecture with the election of President McKinley. He is one of the few individuals who was a representative to be elected to the presidency. It's very rare that that happens. Very rare. Representatives. He was from the House of Representatives. So he's elected in 1897, and he serves a term till 1901. With this return comes the return of prosperity. Remember, Cleveland had a terrible panic, which we would call today what? A depression. And it had all these assorted features. Had all these, the Reading Railroad goes out of business, 24% unemployment. You have a whole bunch of issues that affect it, including some that occurred overseas, right? The London stock market crashes and gold is pulled out of our market. Well, this pretty much comes to an end. They all run these panics run the gamut, and then they pretty much subside. What happens is you overbuild, and you overbuild, and you overbuild, and you overbuild, and you overbuild. Well, there's no need for that stuff, and then you kind of liquidate. And then you find like a nice little balance where in your business where you're making profit. Okay, you sold enough stuff that now you're making profit, or you've consolidated enough stuff. And it's like that with the national economy too. And with that comes a return of prosperity. And with that prosperity, of course, you're going to see a push for another tariff. The Dingley Tariff Act of 1897 is going to be the highest to this point. It has a sliding scale of items from 45 to 57%. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that it had a guarantee or the right of the president to make deals with nations to lower the rates. Like, let's say we're exporting a lot of steel to China, and China, we want to import from them a lot of silk. And silk is at a 42% tax rate, and the and steel to China is at a 56%. The president could negotiate to lower that with the rulers of China. That was an authority, that was a right that he had. So that's a new feature that's added here that makes it a little bit better of a deal. Now, something else that happens here is in 1900, they're going to pass the Gold Standard Act. Remember we talked about the Klondike Gold Rush. When that happens, the issue of gold or silver really isn't an issue anymore because there's so much gold that silver doesn't even compare. And because of that, the whole silver and gold bimetallism issue is dead. The Gold Standard Act of 1900 ends bimetallism. And remember that hoard we talked about that was used to pay off greenbacks is going to be increased to 150 million. It was 100 million, but it's going to increase to 150 million. And it is designed to get those greenbacks that are still on the market from the Civil War out of circulation. So we're talking 35 years, those greenbacks are still out there, and they're trying to pull them in. Why is it so hard to pull them in? There's no control on our monetary supply. Remember that. That's really important as we get into Roosevelt's term. Okay? Because we're heading towards the creation of the Federal Reserve. Why did we have the Panic of 1873? No control on our currency. Why did we have the Panic of 1883? No control on our currency. 93, same thing. We're going to have one in 1907, same reason. We need some form of control on our currency. But people don't like it because of what happened with the Bank of the United States. Even though that was 75 years ago, people are still worried about it. They don't like it. So McKinley is president. Now, during this time period, we are having a problem. Since 1815, we have espoused this concept of isolationism. And And isolationism actually goes even farther back to President Washington's farewell address of 1797, in which he says two things, really. He says, avoid foreign entanglements and avoid political parties. He says the best thing that the United States has going for us is this giant pond right here, called the Atlantic Ocean, that keeps us out of European matters. He says that's great. We need to keep it that way. We don't need to get involved in all their craziness. Because it is that. It's craziness. They go to war over silly things. And because they go to war over silly things, they pull us in if we are too close to them. So isolationism is us saying, stay out. We are going to stay out of all European matters. We'd even gone so far as in 1820 to pass the Monroe Doctrine, which says that all of the Western Hemisphere is closed to European colonization. If you have a problem with any of these Latin American countries, you come to us. Okay? You come to us and we'll handle it. That's the Monroe Doctrine. You don't go in there and handle it yourself. Why do we almost go to war with France over Mexico immediately after the Civil War? Because they violated the Monroe Doctrine. Remember what happened is while we were fighting ourselves, Mexico, it gets invaded by France. Maximilian gets set up as the emperor and takes it over. Now, after the war's over, we look and say, whoa, what's going on down there? And we tell them that they need to leave. Tell France, you need to leave or else we are going to come down there and physically remove you because you are violating the Monroe Doctrine. Well, that had been our watchword since 1815, really the 1820s, up until this time period, the 1900s, the turn of the 20th century. So what changes? Well, big business has entered the picture. And with big business comes trade. Do we produce more than we can consume locally? Yes. As a result, what do we do with our excess goods? We trade it with other nations. If you're going to trade it with other nations, how is it going to get there? How do we get goods to market with other nations? Ships, okay? What are these ships powered by at this time period?
Still wind.
No. Steam has taken the place of wind. There are some still that are, the clipper ships that still are wind, but primarily they are now steam. What does steam-powered engines require to generate the steam? Okay, heat comes from
Coal.
Coal. All right. So, how far is burning coal for steam efficient? No. You need a lot of coal. Okay, because it doesn't go very far. So, what are we going to do across both the Pacific and Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean? What are we going to do, or what are we going to need to do, especially out here, because it's a lot farther. You're going to have outposts. You're going to have places, harbors where you can put in and refuel your ships, and that's going to have to be coal, big, chunky pieces of coal. They have to be stored somewhere. So you have ships going out, dumping off the coal, going back, picking more up, going off, and dropping it off again. Okay? Now, as a result, what occurs? You have Americans going into areas that they haven't been before. And these people, when they get over there, they're going to say like, perhaps we could make this an American settlement. So what happens is the United States gets into the business that we got out of in 1776. We start establishing our colonies at places like Guam, Midway, and through a rather duplicitous event in 1898, we add Hawaii. Hawaii had first experienced American missionaries in the 1820s. The descendants of those missionaries had created giant plantations, and then they were interested in becoming a colony of the United States, so they overthrew the rulers of Hawaii and applied for membership to the United States. Now, that happened under Grover Cleveland's term, and he said, no, that doesn't sound good at all. You guys overthrew the government. No, not going to do it, not interested. McKinley comes in and says, hey, that sounds great. All right? So Hawaii comes in, and you know what the last name of one of those plantation owners was? What? Yeah, Dole. Actually, exactly right. And when you think of Dole, what do you think of? Nope. You think of pineapples? You think of canned? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So we begin getting into colonialism. And what happens is with colonialism and with these areas being opened up as ports of trade and areas for us to extend our spheres of influence further out into the Pacific and into the Atlantic, big business is going to have a farther reach. And if they have a farther reach, they are going to bring more of their issues with them. Okay? So, although isolationism is a good theory, it is pretty much lip service. Okay? This is going to be important after World War I. Now, something that's going to happen during this time period is that there's also going to be this belief that it is the Americans' rights. We'll be very racist here, so forgive me. It's important that you understand what we're talking about under the context of the time period. There's a belief that it is the Americans' viewpoint, or it is the rights of the civilized people of the world to bring civilization to the other uncivilized people of the world. So here is a popular printing from a magazine called Judge. And this is John Bull, who is the equivalent of Uncle Sam for the British. Uncle Sam. And they're climbing up the steps. Up here there's a man who looks kind of like Moses with 2 golden tablets. And it says civilization at the top. That's the goal. And look, you have the white men who are climbing up these hills of ignorance, oppression, superstition, brutality, vice, slavery. And who are they pulling up with them? You have Africans, you have Cubans, and they're very stereotypically drawn. Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians. We have someone here with the Muslim headdress, and they're pulling them up. It's called the white man's burden, that this was their role, this was their job, because they had reached these plateaus. That it was their job to bring up the lesser cultures as well. So it's seen as kind of a role. Now, if you think about that, and you apply that white man's burden to the concept of the Monroe Doctrine, this next issue makes sense. In 1905, Venezuela and British Guyana are fighting over their boundaries. Okay? Venezuela is a Latin American nation. Used to be part of Spain, but overthrew Spanish authority back in the 18-teens. And Guyana was still a British colony. In 1895, Richard Olney, who is the Secretary of State to Cleveland, is going to issue the only corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And basically what this says is that the United States will arbitrate any dispute between a European power and a Latin American power. Yes? The only corollary to the Monroe Doctrine says the United States will arbitrate, which is a third party going in and being like a judge and making a decision, any controversy or dispute between a European power and a Latin American power. Basically what it is we're saying we are over, or we are in charge of these Latin American nations. Okay? At that time period, they probably would have said lesser races. Okay? But see, they didn't see it as racist. Latin America or Europe. They didn't see it as racist. They saw it as something doing good things. You see my quotes? Good things. Because they see themselves as the pinnacle of society, and they want everyone to get up there as well. Now, Great Britain, at this time period, is experiencing a lot of problems in their European alliances. So when the United States comes in and say, you know what, we're going to put ourselves in the middle of this situation, and we are going to arbitrate it, and we are going to make sure that everybody is handled fairly. England says, you know what? We know those guys. Those guys are our cousins. They're our English cousins. We like those guys. They're making good, logical decisions. And so what you see is the United States and England grow closer. Now, we haven't fought a war since 1815. Remember the War of 1812 with England was the last time we fought a war. And we made agreements with them that pretty much took care of any of the other problems that we would have. But it's really this issue that starts this special relationship that we have still today with England. You know, a lot of people kind of look at them as the big brother of the United States. That's a fair assessment, right? They're older, they've been around more, and we both speak the same language. And they call us their American cousins. So England is like, okay, well, that sounds like a good idea. We like this. Now, this brings us to the Cuban Revolution. Cuba had always been seen as a special part of our sphere of influence. Cuba had been an area that we had tried to purchase before. During the period of slavery, Cuba looked like it could be the next southern state. Remember when we were talking about, actually we didn't talk about it in this class, those of you that were with me last semester, we did, but in your 1301 class, you talked about how slavery spread, and it got to Texas, and really when you get to Texas, that's about it. You're not going to spread slavery into New Mexico, right? It's too arid. Really, you're not going to take slavery past I-35 where it is today, because that's pretty much a dividing line. Once you get past that, it's pretty arid. You're not going to have really good growing seasons for a plantation. So what happens is the southern slave-owning class starts to look south. You look and you see all those areas, all those islands, and Cuba's the biggest. So they had kind of thought about taking over Spain. That looked like kind of the next, under manifest destiny, it looked like the next expansion spot. Of course, that didn't work out. It's still a Spanish possession. In the 1870s, Cuba had rebelled against Spain, and we like that. The United States likes it when we see, hey, these guys are fighting for their independence. We like that. We liked it when France fought for their independence in the French Revolution, so they start killing everybody. They're like, whoa, you guys gone off the bridge there. So we like this. This is great. Spain comes in and says, Cuba, we understand that you have problems. We understand that you have problems, and we are going to make adjustments. So the revolution ends, and Spain says, we're going to make adjustments. Cuba says, great. We look forward to these adjustments. Were the adjustments ever made? No, they weren't. Now, Spain is far away. Cuba is close to the United States. Where are the majority? I can't speak to it. where will the majority of the crops that they make in Cuba go? United States. Okay, so we have strong economic ties. By the time we get to 1900, there's about $400 million of money at that time invested, United States money invested in Cuba. Today, that's about $11.4 billion. Sizable investment, yes? For me to match that, I'd have to probably bring in two of my banks for $11.4 billion. So I can only do so much in one bank. A little bit louder, Remington. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So, what would they grow here? I'm giving you a lot of information here. I'm giving you information about where they trade, who they own. The South likes them. Why does the South like them? What else? It's something. Okay? Sugar, yeah. Sugar is the big one. Okay? It's very similar to the South. Agriculturally, temperate, culture-wise, and so it's very similar. All right. So they feel a connection there. Now we've talked about all these tariffs that we popped around. 1890, sugar is going to be placed on the free list. That means when the McKinley tariff was introduced, it said, Cuba, you can import sugar with no taxation. Okay? So let's say, let's take your example of tobacco. Let's say they are half tobacco, half sugar. Tobacco is going to have a 25% 25% import tax, and you're going to have free, no taxes on sugar. Parker, you're the plantation owner. What are you going to do? You find out, you're 50%, 50%, you find out that sugar is on the free list. In 1891, what are you going to do? What are you going to plant? No, sugar is going to be on the free list, which means you can send as much as you want without any taxes. And you're in Cuba. Plant only sugar, that's right. Why? Because what are you concerned with? You're concerned with profit. If you get 100% profit versus 75% profit, what are you going to take? 100%. So you're like, yeah, I'm going to change. Parker's going to change it. And everybody else who's a plantation owner is going to shift. I probably got that F in there. Goodness. Going to get that. I had to. Oh, I got tickled. All right. You're going to shift to sugar. Okay? Lexus, you follow? Good. All right. So now what happens? You have 4 good years. And then the United States changes with the Wilson-Gorby tariff of 1894, and sugar is no longer free. It now has a 25% markup on it. You know what it does? It destroys the economy of Cuba. So things we do in the United States have a result or results or affects other nations. So, their economy is destroyed. They had a lot of promises that have been made. Had those promises by Spain been fulfilled? No, they have not. So what happens? Does anybody have Cuban descent here? Ashley? Who was it? One of our girls last semester was in the last class. I can't remember who it was. But she was from Cuban. She was Cuban descent. It was like in the 50s, before Castro came to power. But what happens now is you take the collapse of the economy, the failed promises that Spain had made, and you have a rebellion sparked. Boom, it explodes. It's a war for independence. It's going to last from 1895 to 1898. Now, what's interesting here is because in this area, you have Anglos, actually the Spaniards, who are the ruling class, and you have the African Americans in Cuba that were the slaves. They're not slaves anymore because Spain actually does away with slavery before the United States does. But they are the descendants of slaves, and they work together to fight Spain when they rebel. And so we like this. And we see this in the news, and we're like, yes, they're going to rebel, and once they rebel, you know what? We'll bring them into our fold, because Texas did the same thing. We rebelled against Mexico, and then we brought them in, yes? Now, Spain is going to send over their best general. His name is Valeriano Weyler. And he's sent in, and he becomes the governor, and he's tasked with putting down the rebellion. First thing he does is he divides up all the people and puts them into concentration camps. Now, concentration camps, we think, in 2016 thinking, we think of Hitler and the Jews. It's not the same thing. What they do is they basically, a lot of times in order to try to cut down on rebellion, you make sure where the people are, so you assign them to camps. So the people live in camps. They're not allowed to leave. They're not going to be killed. Will they be treated poorly? You'll see in a second, yes. But anybody who is not in the camp, therefore, is a rebel. So therefore, through process of elimination, you hunt them down, you kill them, the rebels are gone, and the good people are then allowed to go back out. But what happens here is Weyler is going to be so heavy-handed with his policies, he's going to be known as the butcher. And because he's known as the butcher, this is not going to play well in the United States. Who has ever heard of the Pulitzer Prize? It's named after Joseph Pulitzer, who was a man that had a newspaper and was very popular at this time. There's another man by the name of William Randolph Hearst, and he is a newspaper magnate at the time as well. And these two men are going to take this information and they are going to whip up American frenzy on this issue. William Randolph Hearst is going to send a man, he owns the New York Journal, he's going to send a man by the name of Frederick Remington down to Cuba. And he sends him down there and says, Frederick, I am sending you down there to draw pictures of the war. And Frederick Remington says, there's no war in Cuba. And he says, you supply the pictures, I'll supply the war. Well, why would he want to start a war?
Sell papers.
Ah, sell papers. Yes, because you sell more papers, what happens? You make more money. More. Yeah. Extra, extra, read all about it. United States going to war with Spain. Oh, look at that paper. So Remington goes down there. And Frederick Remington, you may have heard of him. You've probably seen some of his work. He's not very famous as a painter, but as a sculptor, he is very famous. Who has ever seen somewhere, usually at an expensive bank, lawyer's office, or something of that nature, a bronze sculpture, different sizes, of something involving the Old West? Horses, a stagecoach, something of that nature. It's most likely a Remington, because he is famous for those. About 10 years ago, our church was doing a garage sale, and there was this sculpture that came in. It's about this big. And it was somebody giving it to us to sell. And it was a cowboy on his horse, and the horse was rising up on its back feet. And it was on a green marble pedestal, rather heavy. And I saw it, and I was like, wow, that's something neat. And the edge of it was broken off of the pedestal. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I just couldn't get that out of my mind. And I'm like, God, I've seen it somewhere before. I've seen it somewhere. And first day came by, it was still there, and I was just trying to figure out, maybe I want that. Maybe I should buy it. And it was marked $20. And I thought, you know what? I called my wife and I said, if that's there at the end, buy it for $20. I want it, and it's just something about it. I want it. It's $20. She said, okay. And so I got on eBay and I started typing in bronze horse, bucking horse, green pedestal. It was in Remington, and it was worth $500. So I called my wife and I said, "Ooh, take it!" And she said 2 people almost got into a fight over it, and it went for $100. Tyler, what were you saying?
I didn't know it was worth $500 because my dad once bought a car from someone who didn't know how much it was, and well, we were just happy.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah,
I mean, I felt bad afterwards.
Well, but sometimes it's what you have that makes you what you want to get. But anyway, Hearst sends Remington down there, and Remington starts drawing these pictures. And one of the things that gets the people the most upset is this picture right here. Spaniards searched an American woman on an American steamer. Spanish officials stopped an American steamer going into Havana in Cuba, and they searched the area to see if there was any contraband being taken to the rebels. Well, this woman has no clothes on. She has been stripped, and you have these men, 4 Spanish men. Now, if you know anything about Spanish men, I'm talking Spaniards. Spaniards from Spain. You gotta watch out for them, right? They got their mustaches, they got their machismo, and they always are going after the women. They are, you know, they're mean to them, right? Ashley, yes. See, she says yes, right? Haley, yes. You gotta watch out for these Spaniards. You can tell they always have the mustache. Right? Watch out for them. Okay, well, these guys, they strip search this woman. She's naked in front of men who are not her husband. Okay? This is an affront on American culture, society, and the rule of law. Okay? Do you understand this picture being published? People are saying okay. We can talk about this. It's recently. The Marines just said in 2016 women should be drafted, should be eligible for draft. So every one of you guys in here who turned 18, what did you have to do?
I got to sign up for selective
draft. You had to sign up for selective service. Okay? Yeah. So if there's a draft, you'll be called. Women, no, don't have to do it. And they just said, yeah, you have to do it. The Marine said, we're going to have to do it in order to meet our demands. Okay? Me personally, I am against women in combat. I am. Women can be drafted, that's fine. Put them in other areas. I don't want them in combat. And it's not because I think that they're inferior. I think it's great. And you see some of these women who are fighting against ISIS. I think that's awesome. You know, like the Chechens who are fighting against ISIS. It's really cool because, you know, especially I think there was a couple of women who were gang raped by ISIS. And once they escaped, they joined their local military, and they're some of the best snipers in the world. I'm like, that's awesome. You know, there you go. I'm against that because in the United States we have 2 things that we cherish above anything else, and that's mom and apple pie. Okay? And moms are females. And when women go into combat, and they get captured, bad things are going to happen, and we don't want that, okay? It's not what we want to do. Okay, so think about that, and now think about this. This is a woman whose rights are being violated. This is a woman, it's the United States. God created this country, bastion of liberty. No, not going to happen, and they're forcing her to do it. Let's go to war, right? Who's with me? Let's go get them. Because it's those Spaniards with their mustaches and their machismo. The other guy is Joseph Pulitzer, and he's in New York World, and A lot of the stuff is sensational journalism. The Inquirer, what would be considered yellow journalism today. Did this happen? No, it didn't. But because Hearst wanted, it bleeds, it leads, what does he do? He gives them something. Because here you go. Princes and salacious material. Imagine. Extra, read all about it. Women stripped naked by Spanish officials in Havana Harbor on board American ship. That's going to sell, right? Allison, yes.
How do they know for sure that it didn't happen? I mean, I know they were trying to make up stuff to sell their paper, but
Well, Remington say whether it didn't happen.
oh,
Yeah. And you also know that the Spaniards, their culture is very polite to women as well. So this would happen. It's salacious. It's designed to be. It's going to be. Oh my gosh. Now, McKinley is not going to stop us from going to war, but he's not going to really do anything to prevent us either. Okay, he's not going to take anything really to any steps to stop it. To further matters, in 1898, a letter by Enrique de Puy de Lome, who was the Spanish foreign minister to Washington, D.C., writes a letter to his friend in Havana that is captured by Cuban revolutionaries and given to United States newspapers. In it, this letter, DeLome writes about President McKinley, and he says he is a weak man. He caters to the rabble, and besides, he's a low politician who desires to leave the door open to me and stand well with the jingoes of his party. Now, jingo is a term that we would call radicals today. Okay, white-eyed radical. So imagine if the Spanish official called President Obama a dumb, inbred, some other things. Bad words, and is very unintelligent. Okay, would that be an affront to the United States? I'll tell you what, I've been in, because I do student government, I've seen people be at each other's throats, like on an executive board, people be hating each other, and somebody comes in and they say, they talk to the person about the person who everybody's really mad at, say, and it doesn't matter that everybody's hating each other right here. When that person comes in and they start attacking one of their own, they're like, what are you doing? Hey, no, only we can do that. They get upset. If that happened to us, man, Ted Cruz would be behind President Obama. You can't do that, no, sir. He'd be saying, he'd be defending President Obama. Well, I would like to think he would. He'd be saying, defending President Obama and said, you can't do that, we're going to, and demanding concessions. So this, coming at the time that all this is hitting, escalates the issue. Now, something the United States does back then and does now still is when there is a situation that is problematic and there is a risk to Americans in an area, we will send in a military ship. We will send a ship into the area to be kind of an area to get Americans out really quick, if necessary, and also kind of be there to say, hey, we're not going to take any funny business. You're not going to do anything stupid to the nations that are thinking about doing something stupid. Back in 2006, Ukraine tried to rebel against Russia. Vladimir Putin had not poisoned their president. I think the guy died, and they had to bury him in a lead-lined coffin because he was so radioactive. He couldn't be around anybody else, even 6 feet under it. He would still seep out. But in the Ukraine here, we sent in a I'll say it was a cruiser, into the Black Sea to be able to get out any Americans in Ukraine as quick as we could. All right? It was a warning to Putin, we're watching you, while at the same time is also there for American citizens, letting them know we're here to protect you in case things go bad. Nothing changes. Nothing's really changed. To try to show this, we would send the top-of-the-line battleship, brand new, we just had built, the USS Maine, to Havana Harbor in Cuba, and it was designed to go there and kind of be, a statement. It's the American government saying, hey, we are watching what's going on and we're concerned for the safety of our citizens. Okay? We do it all the time. On February 15th, 1898, at 9 p.m., the forward third of the Maine explodes, killing 260 sailors on it. The ship sinks. The newspapers at first report that it was hit by a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. Later in the year, after the war is over, an investigation would say that there was no mine there. There was no mine there. In 1971, the ship would be refloated, and they would examine it. What they discovered is when they looked at the ship and the hull that was there that they were able to find, the explosion resulted in jagged metal coming out. Jonathan, you're nodding your head. What does that mean? What? Say about it. It's going to cause it to sink? Okay, yes. What else?
It blew up inside.
It blew up inside. Whatever it was inside. Because if it had been a mine, the metal would have gone eternal. So what happens? See what I'm saying? See? Okay. So what happens? After they do this, they tow it out to sea and let it go in water that's about 3,100 feet deep. It was eventually determined that it was a coal fire that spread to the magazine area where they kept the ammunition. So it exploded. Now, don't know that in 1898. In 1898, with situations almost at a boil, we now have the loss of an American ship and 260 of our crew. And it looks like it's Spain. The cry, remember the Maine, to hell with Spain, is spread across the land, and war is on its way. McKinley is going to give an ultimatum. He gives Spain 30 days to make reparations for the Maine and make changes to put the revolution down. Now, while all this is going on, Spain is over in the Atlantic going, what the heck is going on with the Americans? We've got a little rebellion, and they're over there going, they're like, well, I'm just getting really upset about this. They have no understanding of what is going on or why we're getting so angry about these things. So what happens is they're confused. And when this ultimatum gets to their government, they're like, what? What the heck are they talking about? And because of the just nature of their archaic governmental system, it takes too long. So when the deadline passes, McKinley has no choice. Could you imagine if a president said, there's a red line here, and if you cross it, we're going to do something, and it passes, and then or that event occurs and the president doesn't do anything, that would not be good. So what happens is McKinley says, all right, Congress, Spain has not acceded to our demands, therefore, I ask for a declaration of war. He gets it on April 17, 1898. Now, in addition to that declaration of war, is added what is known as the Teller Amendment. And what the Teller Amendment does is it says that Cuba, at conclusion of the war, will not be an American possession. It will be independent. Okay? It will be independent. Now, one of the things that has existed since the dawn of the United States is a truism, a certain truism. Truism is something that is always true. And that is, in times of war, the Navy is always ready, and the Army is not. And there's a reason for that. In order for the Navy to be ready, or the Navy to exist, what must they have?
Ships.
If you don't have these ships, you don't keep up with these ships, what happens to those ships? What happens if you have a ship that you do not take care of?
Oh, that's crap.
That's right. And what happens to a ship that is not painted, a metal ship that is not painted on a regular basis? And what happens if it rusts enough? It sinks. And if it sinks, you don't have a ship. So what do you have to do? You have to constantly keep it up. And because of that constant state of readiness, they are always ready. The Army is not ready. The Navy is. Now, there's a man by the name of Admiral Alfred T. Mahan, who is the commandant of West Point. He's a historian, and he writes this book called Dreadnought, The History of Sea Power and Its Influence on the World. And basically what he does in this book is he says, he has a very interesting premise, and that is, the nation that has the greatest navy has always ruled the world. Think about it. He's not wrong. England, during the French Revolution, really, England since the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 has been the dominant force at sea. Why? Well, they're an island nation. If they need anything, they're going to have to go by boat. So the nation that has the biggest navy always wins. Now, this is really kind of the start of World War I. Okay, this is the start of World War I. Because if you're Germany, you're going to say, you ain't wrong. They're going to say, oh, so what do we need to do? We need to start building a strong navy. England says, oh, Germany's building a strong navy. What do I need to do? I need to build a strong navy. France says, whoa, those other guys are building a strong navy. What should I do? I should build a strong navy. We'll see in a little bit where this goes, but for right now, we're not a good example of that. But for right now, I want to put this kind of bug in your ear so you understand what we're talking about. Okay, the Army is going to take forever to get started, and the Navy is going to take a while. The Army at the start of the war would have 2,100 officers and only 28,000 soldiers. At the end, they would be over 200,000 people interested. 200,000 people that have signed up. Now, something interesting that is going to happen during this time period is that they will actually allow people to form volunteer companies. So if you and your buddies wanted to go to war, you could. You could raise your own squad up and go, all right, we're going to go. But that's going to take a while. Now, obviously, it's going to, I see some of you guys going, hey, that's a good idea. Obviously, it's going to take a while to prepare for war, especially with the Army. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, who's one of the greatest presidents of our time, is going to be introduced to you here. And he is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. The Secretary of the Navy was an older man who was always ill. So the Assistant Secretary of the Navy always was ready. I mean, it was taking his job and doing his work for him. So what happens is when this whole war thing starts happening, and people start saying, oh, we're going to go to war. Theodore Roosevelt, who was always up for a good war, Theodore is always up for a good war, says, you know what? This war is against Spain. It's not just going to be fought in Spain or in the Spanish possessions in the Caribbean. He telegraphs out to Hong Kong, Commodore George Dewey, and he sends him a message and he says, at the beginning of hostilities with Spain, be prepared to attack the Philippines. The Philippines are a Spanish possession. So Dewey, things that we used to do, we don't do anymore. Dewey gets his ships ready. In times of peace, ships were painted white. He paints his gray, so they're ready to go. Because if you go to gray, it's war. So he has all his ships painted gray. When the declaration of war comes, he sails into Manila Bay in the Philippines, and at sunrise on May 1st, 1898, he begins firing into the Spanish flotilla, their ships, without warning. Now, several weeks had gone by, but Spain had not bothered to tell the base in the Philippines that war had been declared. So he starts out about 5,000 yards out, and he fires, and he fires again, and he fires again, and he keeps making these passes. Eventually, the entire Spanish armada there is sunk at the loss of no American lives. One guy gets a splinter from a shell that lands pretty close to him, a little metal splinter, but he's all right. From there, he telegraphs to the mainland and says, we have taken Manila Bay, send us troops so we can actually take the city of Manila. Manila is going to surrender on August 13th, 1898. Now, there's going to be a lot of problems with mobilization. The United States has not fought a war since when? Civil War. Unfortunately, some of the things that they have left over from the Civil War are going to be used. What were the colors that we associate with the Civil War? Blue and gray. And what did they wear? What were their uniforms made out of? Nope. They loved them. They're made out of cotton. They're made out of wool. Where are they going? They're going to Cuba in the summer, wearing wool. Some of the food that they have is still left over from the Civil War. There is no thought put to actually forming logistics to say, okay, we need all the supplies to come down first. They're going to leave from Tampa Bay. We need all the supplies to come down first. They're going to take the IGN Railroad. Okay, great. Don't take the IGN Railroad. All right, we need the troops to come in on the Philadelphia Railroad. Great, they'll come in on the Philadelphia Railroad. And there would be a problem. The problem is there was no organization. So you have 1 million, yes, 1 million soldiers show up. They don't have any supplies. They don't have a way to get there, and they can't find their food because it's all in this giant logjam of other trains that are farther up the tracks that can't get to them because they won't leave. Now, the invasion of the Philippines is, the invasion of the Philippines is a success, but the invasion of Cuba is another problem that has to be dealt with because they can't find the Spanish fleet that protects it. It's led by Admiral Cervera. And Admiral Cervera is not, if he's not able to be dealt with, how are they going to get troops and ships ships of troops and supplies across the 90-mile gap between the two. If they don't, it'd be seen as shooting fish in a barrel. Now, this is Theodore Roosevelt. He's going to resign his position, and he's going to come down to Texas. He's going to go down to San Antonio, and he's going to go to the Menger Hotel. Anybody ever been to the Menger Hotel? It's right next to the Alamo. He goes to the Menger Hotel, sets up shop in the bar. And he starts recruiting the roughest men he can find to go over and be his group to attack Cuba. He calls them the Rough Riders. It's a civilian group that he raises, and they're going to go over there. You go over to the Menger Hotel, they still have a plaque that says, here's where Theodore Roosevelt's at. He created a camp out there, and then eventually they go out to Tampa as well to leave. But again, nobody can do anything until we find the Spanish fleet. All right, that's where we will stop for today. Yeah, you keep your tests.
Okay.